So I'll be talking today on the newer glaucoma surgical techniques. Newer means something which is beyond the trabeculectomy and beyond the glaucoma drainage devices, because the drainage devices are now as good as a conventional form of a surgical treatment. So we'll move something beyond that. And most of these surgeries which I'll be talking on are still under research, and they have not been still yet accepted as a conventional form of treatment. But just for the sake of your knowledge, so that you all are aware, and in case in the exams there is a question um, regarding the recent advances or newer surgical techniques or something like that, you should be able to have a fair idea of all these things. So most of these techniques involve some form of a device or an implant, but for the presentation point of view, no conflicts of interest. I'm sharing all these, the merits and the demerits from all of these companies and devices, mainly from the academic point of view. Why did these devices and implants and newer glaucoma surgeries have to be designed? Because we know that there are lots of complications associated with the conventional treatment, the conventional trabeculectomy. And I'll not go into the details because all of us are aware of this. The bleb-related complications, the infection, the hypotony, the surgical skills that are required. And therefore, there is the concept of minimally invasive glaucoma surgery that is coming up. That is something which is less invasive than the conventional trabeculectomy, and which is therefore associated with less complications, but is, if not more effective, at least as good as the conventional trabeculectomy. So we'll group the different types of surgeries as outflow procedures, basically, which are external filtering procedures and internal filtering procedures. In the external filtering procedures, we have the newer ones. We have the express shunt, we have the aqueous tube shunt, and we have the Fugo blade transciliary filtration. One of this is the conventional trabeculectomy, but since that is not new, I have not included it, but it falls in this category. Then we have the internal filtration surgeries. In this, again, we have internal approaches, that is the ab interno techniques. We have external approaches, and we have the approaches which focus on the uveoscleral outflow. So in the internal approaches, again, one is the goniotomy. Goniotomy is now again becoming more and more popular, but still it is not a newer technique. It was there, but was not used. And so that is something which I have not included, but it falls in here. Then we have the excimer laser trabeculotomy, the iStent, the trabeculotomy internal approach, that is the trabectome. In the external approaches, we have the trabeculotomy, the viscocanalostomy, canaloplasty, and those which act on the uveoscleral outflow, that is the Solex gold shunt implantation. So these are our internal filtration surgeries. Then there are inflow procedures, exactly opposite. These are which reduce the inflow, therefore they act on the aqueous humor production. Again here, the first one, that is the conventional cyclocryotherapy, which we all do routinely in our clinical practice. That is a conventional one, so that comes at the top. And then the newer ones, that is the transscleral cyclophotocoagulation, and the ECP, that is the endoscopic cyclophotocoagulation. So you can broadly categorize all these procedures as outflow procedures, inflow procedures, and in outflow, external filtering and internal filtering. So we'll see each of these one by one. The common characteristics of all these types of mixed procedures are that it can be tried prior to a trab or following a failed trab. Because these are minimally invasive, they are not associated with the complications of trab, that is hypotony and infection mainly. The disadvantages, they can just provide a little moderate IOP lowering, not as much as with a trab, except the cyclophotocoagulation, wherein you can have a drastic IOP lowering and sometimes an unpredictable IOP lowering. Most of these, again, except the cyclophotocoagulation, they can be used only in the open angle types of glaucomas. And again, most of these, since they are associated with the use of some kind of a device or implant, that there is a major cost associated with all of these procedures. And this is one reason why these have not become so acceptable, and they are still under the trial and research and experimentation phase. So coming to all of them one by one, we begin with the outflow procedures, the external filtering types of surgeries. The most common and the most popular one is the express glaucoma implant by the Alcon Laboratories. This you can see, it is basically a type of a small shunt. This is the bevel which allows the aqueous to flow in. This is a port which allows the aqueous humor uninterrupted flow. Basically, it is a non-valve type of a mechanism, but because of its typical construction, it provides some form of a restriction to the flow. This is a small spur. It is a small type of projection which does not allow the device to come out. And this is a foot plate which does not allow the device to go into the anterior chamber. So to allow the intrusion and extrusion, this spur and this foot plate are there. So this is a small video showing how these express shunts are implanted.
First, a limbal or fornix-based conjunctival flap is made in the upper quadrant.
Is the audio on?
A 50% depth scleral flap is then fashioned up to clear cornea. MMC is then applied, left in place for a period of time determined by the surgeon, and removed. Instead of sclerostomy and iridectomy, a pre-incision is made into the anterior chamber parallel to the iris at the bottom of the gray zone using a 23 to 27 gauge needle. An express mobility check is then performed. The shunt is inserted into the anterior chamber through the pre-incision site. A sponge is pressed against the shunt to verify the flow. The scleral flap is then sutured back into place, followed by the conjunctiva. Despite being less than 3 millimeters long, the tube reduces IOP significantly by diverting the aqueous humor from the anterior chamber into the subscleral space. The express mini glaucoma.
So you see, it's a very simple procedure, and as you could see, it is just you have an IOL injector. It has an injector on it, and you create a 27 gauge small opening into the anterior chamber, and the implant is inserted. So what are the advantages of this express implant? As I said, because these all are minimally invasive, there is a lower risk of hypotony and shallow AC complication. There is a more uniform filtration control, because though it is non-valve, because of its typical construction of the implant, it has a flow restricting mechanism. And because there is no peripheral iridectomy done, the iridectomy related complications, the synechia formation, the touching of the iris and inflammation, all that are not there. But it's not without disadvantages. It is again an external filtering surgery. So small bleb is formed, because you saw that there is a scleral flap, there is a conjunctival peritomy which is there. So a small bleb is formed. So obviously the bleb related complications will happen to a smaller extent. And because fibrosis may occur, and you may even require an antifibrotic along with this. And because it is an implant which is introduced, the implant related complications, like it may still migrate inside, get extruded outside, it may touch the cornea, it may keep touching the iris and cause uveitis, etc. And as I said, it can be used only in open angle glaucoma cases. The second one of a similar type is the Aquisys implant by the Aquisys Inc. It is a similar kind of a device. You can see it is just a kind of a dimension of a needle. This is a routine needle which we use for sewing. So it is just the dimension of a needle, or you can say as good as a thick hair. So it is similarly implanted, just that its structure is similar, and it stays under the conjunctiva, filtering the aqueous from the anterior chamber onto the conjunctiva. So this is how it looks like. As you can see, it is implanted from the anterior chamber and it goes into the conjunctiva. So unlike the express, where we had to do a peritomy, where we had to do a scleral flap and then introduce it from outside, here we introduce it from the anterior chamber into the subconjunctival space. So the scleral dissection and the conjunctival dissection are lesser with this. So it keeps filtering directly from the anterior chamber into the subconjunctival space. And the third one in this category is the Fugo blade transciliary filtration. We all know the Fugo blade. It was basically originally designed by late Dr. Daljit Singh. He has used it for various different stages and techniques and steps of different surgeries. So this plasma blade is the same one where here it is used for a transciliary filtration. So what is done is basically a conjunctival flap is created and a 600 micron small scleral window is created. And through the window, the ablation is done with the plasma blade. So plasma energy is delivered through the scleral window directly over the pars placatum. So what happens, the aqueous which is formed, instead of going anteriorly, it goes out through the posterior chamber directly outside into the subconjunctival space. So this is basically a type of a posterior chamber filtration. So advantages are it is a novel route of external filtration, and because it allows a posterior chamber filtration, that is the aqueous goes directly from the ciliary body into the subconjunctival space, there is less risk of a flat anterior chamber and hypotony and those AC related complications, and it is a very quick surgery. The disadvantages are, again, because it is an external filtering surgery and the bleb forms because of the subconjunctival drainage of the fluid, again, the bleb related complications are still possible. And if you are not very careful of the thickness of the scleral window, as you can see here, if you create a full thickness window and do not close this properly, you may in fact leave it as an open wound. And this carries a very high risk of endophthalmitis. So you have to be very careful of the thickness of the window that you create. It has to be 600 microns. If it's very deep, you may just enter through and through into the onto the ciliary body. So that was the external filtering surgeries. Now we come to the internal filtering surgeries. The most common of these, which is you can say as good as a trabeculectomy and which is very popular these days, and in fact it's not a newer surgeries but it's picking up these days, is deep sclerectomy. So basically here what you do, as in trabeculectomy, you create a superficial scleral flap. The difference is that this flap thickness will be just 1/3 of the entire scleral thickness. Normally we do is about half the scleral thickness in a conventional trab. Here we do it about 1/3 of a thickness. Below this we create another scleral flap. And this should be just so thick that you should be able to visualize the underlying choroid and ciliary body. So not so thick that you don't visualize that underlying structures, and not so thin that you actually perforate the choroid or damage the ciliary body. So you create a second scleral flap. Once you create that, you excise that entire tissue. So that is actually a deep sclerectomy. This inner flap that you dissected, you have to excise that. So you will be lying directly over the Schlemm's canal. So here, this area is of the trabecular meshwork and Schlemm's canal. So you just strip that roof of the Schlemm's canal. So this is actually de-roofing of the Schlemm's canal. And then simply you put this flap back, suture the scleral flap and suture the conjunctiva. So basically you are de-roofing the Schlemm's canal and you are not entering the anterior chamber. And that is why it is said to be minimally invasive, because you are not entering the anterior chamber. So this is the actual picture. So peritomy is done. Then you see the scleral flap is done. It could be anything. It could be rectangular, it could be square, it can be even a triangular flap. Usually it is said to be around 5 by 5 millimeters. So an outer flap is designed. Then an inner flap is designed. As I said, the thickness should be just that you can just well visualize the underlying uveal structure. Then you excise this scleral flap, so creating a deep sclerectomy. And here is the Schlemm's canal, the trabecular meshwork and Schlemm's canal, where the white meets the blue. So there you can see this tissue, it is just stripped off. So therefore you are de-roofing the Schlemm's canal. So all the aqueous that is now coming into the Schlemm's canal can directly approach the scleral lake and it can filter out through the subconjunctival space. So you are not entering into the anterior chamber and you are not doing an iridectomy. A further step ahead of this is the carbon dioxide assisted deep sclerectomy. Here the principle is almost the same, just that it is laser assisted. So you create a scleral flap the same way as I mentioned earlier. A standard scleral flap is created. Then the carbon dioxide laser beam, instead of creating a second scleral flap and removing the strip of the trabecular descent membrane, you apply the laser directly in this region where the Schlemm's canal is. So by ablation, you are basically de-roofing or unroofing the Schlemm's canal. And what is the end point of your ablation? How long and how much will you ablate? Till you see the aqueous which is percolating from the Schlemm's canal, and you are no longer able to apply the laser, because the moment the aqueous starts percolating, it will not allow the laser to further ablate. So the moment you feel that your laser is not ablating tissue properly, that means you have de-roofed it completely and the aqueous is out now. So that is your end point. And then you just close the scleral flap and the conjunctival flap. So this is the carbon dioxide assisted deep sclerectomy. This did not pick up as well as the deep sclerectomy, because again, the cost of the laser which is associated, and this laser then does not have other functions and utility. And therefore this procedure again did not pick up very well. But deep sclerectomy as such is performed by a lot of surgeons. Then we have the viscocanalostomy and canaloplasty. So what is canaloplasty? Canal is basically we are treating the Schlemm's canal, and plasty, as we all know, that is a modification. So what is actually done, we'll see in this animation.
In this procedure, a small opening is made in the sclera to gain access to the Schlemm's canal. A microcatheter, essentially a fiber optic tube, is inserted to encircle and enlarge the drainage canal. After a full circle of cannulation, the microcatheter is used to pull a suture through the entire circumference of the canal. The ends of the suture are then tied together to provide tension to the inner wall of the canal and the associated trabecular meshwork. This keeps the canal open and facilitates aqueous humor drainage.
So as you saw, basically you reach up to the Schlemm's canal. You first insert a catheter all around, and then when the catheter comes out through one port, you tie a Prolene suture to it and you withdraw the catheter. So this is the kind of a same procedure as they do in the routine cardiac angiography. You pass a catheter and then you pass the stent along with it. Viscocanalostomy was a kind of a predecessor to this technique, wherein after the Schlemm's canal is identified here, at any one point, a high viscosity sodium hyaluronate was injected on either side into the Schlemm's canal. So some amount of sodium hyaluronate injected medially and some amount laterally. The problem with this was that it does not dilate and keep open the total circumference of the Schlemm's canal. Only as further as you can go with the sodium hyaluronate, only that much part will be kept open. Second is, it is not a permanent procedure, because over a period of time, as and when the sodium hyaluronate gets absorbed and washed away, the effect starts decreasing. And therefore, they designed this canaloplasty. So its main advantages, the advantages are, it gives you a possibility of a 360-degree treatment. That is, you can pass the suture through the entire circumference of the Schlemm's canal. And you can actually confirm where you are placing your probe. Because with the viscocanalostomy, what may happen, you may just create a false passage and you might inject the sodium hyaluronate there. It might not have actually gone into the Schlemm's canal. Whereas with this fiber optic and beaming in of the catheter, you can actually identify where you are going and the suture can be passed actually into the canal. So that confirmation is always there. And you can always convert these procedures into a trabeculectomy if you fail to complete the procedure. Disadvantages, you need to sacrifice the conjunctiva again, because you need to dissect the conjunctiva, you need to make that scleral flap, and you need to dissect the Schlemm's canal. It is not always so easy to identify the Schlemm's canal. All those who have assisted in pediatric glaucoma surgeries, you know trabeculotomy is not so easy a procedure. And there is a technical difficulty in the suture placement and how tight to tie your suture, because sometimes it may be very loose, it may be too tight, it may just tear off or break off and the knot comes off and all those things. And you may sometimes have to use antimetabolites also. And this always leaves a foreign body, even though it is an inert thing, there is always a permanent suture which is lying there in the Schlemm's canal. Then we have the uveoscleral outflow procedures. These were those procedures which focused on the conventional outflow facility. Then there are those which increase the uveoscleral outflow. Here, the traditional one was creating a cyclodialysis cleft, which actually allows the fluid, the aqueous, to exit via the supraciliary or the uveoscleral outflow passage. Even in the conventional trabeculectomy, what we routinely do, if you do your window or the sclerostomy a little posterior, instead of at the junction of white and the blue, there is always a chance that you might create a small cyclodialysis cleft. So it's not always the trabeculectomy is working. It might also be that you have created inadvertently a cyclodialysis cleft, and that is what is keeping the IOP low. And sometimes the failure may be because this cleft is small, it gradually closes, it gets scarred, and then the IOP starts rising. So cyclodialysis cleft is most often an unwanted and unidentified accompaniment with your trabeculectomy. Now, currently, what do we do? What is in research is the gold microshunt. So gold means actually it is made of a 24 karat gold. This is a gold plate, and it is again a non-valve drainage device. The fenestra are for the filtration, and these rings are basically for the stability and to allow it to prevent its migration, intrusion and exclusion. So how do you use this plate? Basically, a conjunctival flap is created, then a full thickness scleral incision is created, and a supraciliary pocket is created. Basically, you just open the space over the ciliary body. And then entering via the anterior chamber, you keep an AC maintainer so that you have space in the anterior chamber, and this plate is inserted. So part of the plate will be lying in the anterior chamber and part of it will be lying in the supraciliary space that you created. So it just creates a kind of a flowing bridge for the aqueous from the anterior chamber into the supraciliary space. And this is how it looks like in gonioscopy. Again, advantages, it's a novel outflow mechanism because all others, they focus on the conventional pathway. This focuses on a different pathway. There is no external filtering bleb. And if you feel that your scleral thickness was not enough or it is not allowing the supraciliary flow to occur, you can further ablate that area with a laser. Small amount of conjunctival dissection is necessary. So it may cause local scarring and fibrosis and all that. And again, because of the procedure being an implant-based procedure, you may have all those complications again. It may get extruded, it may come out into the anterior chamber. You may inadvertently damage the choroid also while doing the scleral dissection or implanting it into the space. So choroidal hemorrhages may occur or choroidal clefts can occur. And this is another one based on the same principle, the CyPass shunt. It was designed by the Alcon people. This has been withdrawn and is no more available into the market. It's completely withdrawn device. But just for your information, so that you're aware, like something like this was existing, and if any of the examiners may tend to ask you whether you're aware of not. So the principle is the same, but instead of a plate, this is a small tube-like structure, and it has a similar rings. These are the retention rings, and it has similar fenestra. So it's the same like the gold one, but this is a kind of a tubular structure, and you can see it's so small and fine. And the placement is also same, like it is implanted from the anterior chamber and into the supraciliary space. So same way, you do a peritomy, you do a scleral dissection, you reach up to the supraciliary space, create a pocket there, and then you implant the CyPass through the anterior chamber into the supraciliary space. And this is how it would look like in gonioscopy. But over a period of around 3 years and 5 years studies that were done on this, it was found that it caused a significant amount of endothelial cell loss. Much more than would ever have happened without such an implant in place, and this was quite significant. And therefore, the Alcon, they have totally withdrawn this project and they are considering for certain modifications. So this is no more available in the market, but this is just for your information so that you are aware that such a stent was there. And finally, we have the newer surgeries which are angle based. So in this, one of the popular ones and which is done to a large extent in the Western countries is the eye stent. Again, it is a small titanium stent and it is implanted using a gonio lens, or you use a Kopy lens per operative. So you visualize the trabecular meshwork and into the Schlemm's canal it is injected. So it one end it lies in the anterior chamber and the other end goes directly through the meshwork into the Schlemm's canal. So this is how it looks like. This is a small injector. The device is loaded at the tip. And the moment you see, this is a gonioscope, the Kopy's gonio lens, which you are seeing. So you visualize the trabecular meshwork. And the moment you see you are at the right place, then you just shoot. This is a button, so you just shoot. And the device goes through the meshwork into the Schlemm's canal. And as you can see, there are two guards here, just like they were there in the express shunt. So similarly, it allows it prevents the intrusion and extrusion. So, and many people now, they come up with the 1 or 2 or 3 eye stents in their eyes. So advantages, it opens the path from the anterior chamber to the Schlemm's canal, and it spares the conjunctiva because this is an internal filtering surgeries, and this can be combined with the cataract extraction and phaco surgeries as well. Disadvantages, again, only a local part of the Schlemm's canal can be managed. It does not treat 360 degrees of the Schlemm's canal, and again, it's an implant-based procedure. Just for your information, if this session gets ended within 8 to 9 minutes, we can connect again using the same ID. So we'll log in again using the same ID. Then we have the Hydrus aqueous implant. This is the world's first intracanalicular scaffold. Again, this is under investigation. The principle is absolutely the same, only that it goes entirely into the Schlemm's canal. It just completely within the Schlemm's canal. So it tries to keep the Schlemm's canal open. And as you can see, these are fenestrae which keep the Schlemm's canal dilated. And this is the newer one, the trabectome. This has been now getting more and more into practice, and there are wet labs for trabectomes also now in all the GSIs. It has started since 2 years. Wet labs on trabectomes. Basically, it is a kind of an electrocautery device. So it is connected to a system. It has a foot switch and it has an irrigation aspiration connected to it. And basically, it has on its tip the electrodes are there. So you again using a gonio lens, the Kopy's lens, you visualize the angle, you see the trabecular meshwork, and you just ablate those areas. You treat those areas with these electrodes. So basically, you are trying to remove the meshwork and you are de-roofing the Schlemm's canal. And the irrigation as aspiration are basically to remove all the pigment that is released when you remove the trabecular meshwork. So it has an irrigation port and aspiration port, and these are the electrodes which ablate the trabecular meshwork. So advantages are, again, it treats the Schlemm's canal, it removes the tissues to prevent the closure. It's an internal approach, so no conjunctival scarring, no bleb-related complications. But again, the clefts may close because of peripheral anterior synechia formation, and you may not always be able to treat the Schlemm's canal 360 degrees, because doing through a gonioscope at one point of time is very, very difficult. So to do it 360 degrees is almost next to impossible. So treating it 360 degrees is very, very difficult. And finally, we have the Zen gel. This is again a very expensive stent designed by the Allergan people. And basically it's a small porcine gel material and cross-linked with glutaraldehyde. So it basically just swells when it comes in contact with the aqueous humor and becomes flexible. So you just inject that gel again through the anterior chamber into the subconjunctival space. So it creates a subconjunctival balloon formation and it keeps that open and it allows a continuous passage for the aqueous humor formation. But this is again very, very expensive, and people have had to have a Zen and again an iStent and finally again landing up in a conventional trabeculectomy. And finally, doing a trabeculotomy using the excimer laser. So it's the same principle. Use a gonio lens, identify the trabecular meshwork, and apply the laser beam, the excimer laser beams over the trabecular meshwork. So you basically ablate the trabecular meshwork and open the Schlemm's canal. So you just do a paracentesis, inject viscoelastic, use a gonio lens, allow your laser probe to pass across the anterior chamber to the meshwork and create openings into the Schlemm's canal. Again, the advantages are the same. It's an internal procedure, so no bleb related and conjunctival related complications. And lastly are the aqueous reduction surgeries, the endoscopic cyclophotocoagulation and the transscleral cyclophotocoagulation. Basically, endoscopic is you are using actually an endoscopic procedure. You are entering intracamerally and it's an invasive procedure. You directly visualize the ciliary processes and under direct visualization, you ablate them. So you can actually see the whitening of the ciliary processes. You can see them shrink and get atrophied and permanently destroyed. And because this is an invasive procedure, it can be combined with other surgeries like cataract extraction or a phaco also. The advantage of an ECP is that because you do it under direct visualization, you can actually titrate the amount of ablation you want to do, and you can gauge whether you would want to repeat it or how much you have done, and whether you have treated 90 degrees and you want to do it 180 degrees or whatever. The similar one is the transscleral. Both of them use a diode laser. Transscleral is basically just like a cyclocryo that you do. It's an external, no conjunctival peritomy, nothing. It's directly done on the ocular surface in the region of the pars plana. So here the disadvantage will be you will not be able to visualize. So whatever you do, it's basically an unpredictable and untitrable type of a cyclophotocoagulation. But it's an external procedure, so you can do it anywhere on any day and even as an OPD procedure. And because both these procedures, they are basically non-titrable to the precise extent, they are mainly reserved as refractory forms of treatment. That is, when your other forms of treatment are not working, you use the ECP or the TSCP. Because sometimes it may be possible that you have just ablated too much and the eye may end up into phthisis. So all said and done, as I said, most of these devices are very, very expensive. They are still under experimentation and research phase. Until date, trabeculectomy does remain the gold standard and the first choice. And if this fails, then we can go for the glaucoma drainage implants. So that's all.